Tá fáilt rih go léir go dtí áir scríbneoirí na hÉireann I mala clia an tróna áling seo. Tásúla go municipal sibh tanmh as an ócáid. Welcome to Dublin on this beautiful spring evening. My colleague Cassia Gaden-Gilmartin and myself, Betty Stenson, are here in the Irish Writers' Centre building in Parnell Square tonight. And along with the rest of the team at the Irish Writers' Centre, we'd like to welcome you to the launch of the Irish Writers' Centre Novel Fair 2023. Thanks to everyone who registered to attend tonight. There's been an enormous amount of interest in the event, and we will do our best to give you a clear picture of what Novel Fair is, what you should expect during the process of submitting, what happens after we receive your manuscript, and how your novel might finally end up on bookshelves worldwide. The Irish Writers' Centre Novel Fair is an innovative writing competition, now in its 11th year. Essentially, 12 Novel Fair winners are given the chance to pitch their novels to publishers and literary agents, face-to-face in the building here prior to COVID, and laterally online via Zoom. Submissions for 2023 will be open from the 1st to the 30th of September, and you will find details of how to submit on the website. I'll just run through some details before I introduce you to the panel. The running time for this event is 60 minutes, and we will have a Q&A at the end of the session. You can submit your questions as they occur to you, and we will attempt to answer them or point you in the right direction. We have enabled the closed captioning function for subtitles, but you're welcome to disable them on your own device if you wish. Finally, if you have any queries or questions that occur to you after this session has ended, please feel free to email us at novelfair@writerscentre.ie. Tonight, we are delighted to welcome to our panel 2014 Novel Fair winner Katrina Lally. Katrina Lally's first novel, Eggshells, was shortlisted for the 2015 Newcomer Award at the Irish Book Awards and the 2016 Kate O'Brien Debut Novel Award. She won the 2018 Rooney Prize for Irish Literature and was awarded a Lannan Literary Fellowship Award in 2019. Her second novel, Wonderland, was published in 2021. Gavin Corbett has published 3 novels: Innocence in 2003, This Is the Way 2013, and Green Glowing Skull 2015. This Is the Way was named 2013 Kerry Group Irish Novel of the Year. He has been writer-in-residence at Trinity College, Dublin and UCD, and is currently the writer-in-residence at NUI Galway. He was one of the 3 judges on Novel Fair 2022. Sally Ann Sweeney joined Mulcahy Associates in 2013. Passionate about the editorial side of agenting, Sally Ann enjoys both working with debuts and helping established authors take their careers to the next level. Her fiction tastes are wide-ranging, from the literary to the very commercial, but she's always excited by a distinctive voice, strong storytelling, and a fresh premise. Sally Ann is also interested in memoirs, food writing, and thought-provoking nonfiction. So a very, very warm welcome to those of you already in Dublin and to those of you coming from the UK like Sally Ann to the launch here tonight. So Katrina, I'm going to start off with you, and I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Could you tell us a bit about your novel Eggshells, which was selected as one of the winners of Novel Fair 2014? Katrina.
Okay, thanks for the intro, Betty. So, well, it's funny, I started writing Eggshells, I think it's 11 years now, it was 2011, and it's bizarre to be still talking about it so many years later. It's about Vivian, she's my main character, and Vivian is an eccentric woman who, she doesn't fit in. She believes she's a changeling, and she's walking around the streets of Dublin. She's looking for a portal to another world. She thinks she belongs in another world. And I got the idea when I was unemployed and I was walking the streets of Dublin myself, job hunting. So I kind of took that, I suppose, to extreme, that kind of sense of seeking and desperation. And I started off with not knowing, I think I was writing a novel. I was looking at all the street signs around Dublin that had letters missing in them and started taking notes of them. And then had more fun thinking about, you know, who would be looking for a pattern or a code here, and where could this code lead a character who was seeking something or some kind of pattern. So that's kind of the premise. It's not very plot driven, it's character driven novel. And I think it has driven some of my friends crazy because not much actually happens in it. It's more character based. And Vivian goes to real places in Dublin. So I kind of took myself around Dublin myself and went to like places like Middle Third in Killester, where Vivian believes this could be Middle Earth and she's looking for a hobbit to guide her. So I just kind of put these ordinary places and tried to make them a bit more magical.
Okay, and could you tell us a bit about the process of submitting Eggshells to Novel Fair back in 2014 and your journey to publishing?
Yeah, so I needed a deadline. That was the big thing for me. Like I'd never published anything before writing this novel. So I didn't even know if it was a novel. I remember Googling, what is a novel? How do you write a novel? How many words is in a novel? And the Novel Fair just helped me, like trying to tweak those 10,000 words and then just focusing on it as an actual thing that could be published someday. That was really helpful, because for me, like, deadlines are important because procrastination is a big feature of my life, which I blame on lack of confidence. That if you don't kind of believe in what you're doing innately, it's very hard to kind of propel yourself forward unless you have an external deadline. So I remember reading online about this 10,000 word deadline for, I think it was October. So October 2013. And I worked kind of steadily on that myself. I remember the day itself, back then it was paper submission, it wasn't online. And I do remember having printer issues, of course, leaving it to the last minute, having printer issues that day. And then the printer breaking before the midday deadline and thinking, sure, it's not going to happen. This is the universe telling me, it's not a good idea. And I remember my partner just saying, no, don't be daft, and running off to an internet cafe, finding a printer and hand delivering it. So that's how I got in. And it was amazing. Like I still remember getting that phone call. It was Brendan McAvilly, I think, that worked in the Writer Centre at the time. And I think it was January getting that call that I'd been one of the finalists. And it was exceptional. Like it still is my favorite writing memory. That kind of, it was the first time I thought, wow, this could happen. Like, this is something maybe I should continue with. So it's an amazing memory I have. And I always credit the Writing Centre and the Novel Fair for just starting you off.
I love the idea you're saying to yourself, what is a novel? How many words are there in a novel? And did you ever, sort of get imposter syndrome, as people call it now? Obviously you didn't get published straight away. And this is important to say, because for people who are entering the Novel Fair, and even people who become finalists and meet the publishers and agents, it can be a very long, slow process, but it can happen very quickly as well. So I'm asking you two questions there about the imposter syndrome, and also how long did it actually take you to find an agent?
Yeah, I think it was
find a publisher.
Right. Yeah, it was quick. I think as these things go, like I've heard since, the publishing can be slow. So I got an agent within a couple of weeks of the Novel Fair, and then I got a publisher a few months later and signed a deal. So it was a year and a couple of months between being in the Novel Fair and getting published, which is, I think, fairly quick. So that was incredible. But like the Novel Fair day itself is it's so intense. It was amazing. And I've heard it kind of been likened to Dragon's Den, but I found that speed dating for nerds analogy is better, because it does feel very friendly and welcoming. And like I say, like I knew nothing about the publishing process. So the prep day for me was huge, to kind of teach you about the publishing side of things. I'd only thought of the writing side of things. The imposter syndrome, that's like, I think that'll always stay with me. It has got a bit better. I've got so many more rejections since, and I'm learning not to take them personally. But the Novel Fair day, so I got an agent, Ger Nickel, from that day, and then she kind of sent it around to other publishers that weren't at the Novel Fair. So I was getting then rejections from, I suppose, publishers who were at the fair and other publishers. And I had to learn fairly quickly not to take them personally. They were coming thick and fast. So that's one benefit of the Novel Fair, I suppose, it's beating that slush pile and speeding up things. But it also means you have to get used to, fairly consistent rejections.
So it does what it says on the tin, you beat the slush pile.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to leave that there for the moment. Katrina, but we'll be back to you. And just to say, we had a wonderful example last night of the journey of a novel from self to shelf when Olivia Fitzsimon's novel, The Quiet Whispers Never Stop, was launched at Hodges Figgis in Dublin. Olivia was a 2020 Nobel Fair finalist, and she met literary agent Brian Lang at the fair and went on to be published, who picked her up as a client. And she went on to be published by John Murray. Surrounding Olivia at the launch last night, among a large literary community, was Michelle Gallen, another Nobel Fair winner with Big Girl, Small Town, Marianne Lee, A Quiet Tide, which has just been optioned for by Mixed Bag Media, I think, for filming, and several others as well. So it's really for us, for the publishers and agents as well, the judges, I'm sure, for anybody who's involved in any way with the Nobel Fair, it's a very, very gratifying situation. And I should say, you've had amazing success with winning awards with your writing, Katrina. So huge congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
So Gavin, Nobel Fair Judge 2022. Can you tell us what your experience was, first of all, and then I'll ask you more specific questions. Did you actually enjoy being a judge?
Yeah, I did. I did very much so. Yeah, I mean, I was lucky in that I had a couple of months free, a block of time towards the end of last year free that I could devote to reading the manuscripts that came my way. I was expecting kind of for it to be, you know, a double-edged sword, to you know, find some of them a little bit kind of tedious or head-wrecking, and some of them to be very good. And I expected to have most of my days free. You know, I expected to you know, do my reading in the morning and then sort of have, you know, sort of from the early afternoon onwards free to do other things, but it ended up taking up all my time, and I didn't mind one bit. I think I got, what was it, 130 manuscripts, something like that, 130 10,000 word manuscripts, so it amounted to about 1.3 million words. And I can promise you, Headmistress Stenson, that I read every word, every single word. I expected to be able to, you know, like, you know, I've had so much experience of kind of vetting for universities, for people looking to get on places in some of the courses I've been teaching and administering, and I've had experience of editing. So I'm sort of long enough in the tooth now to kind of know that there's plenty of kind of inchoate writing that you can, you know, you can gauge after a couple of pages. It isn't going to go anywhere. There's just, you know, this person just doesn't have it to sustain it. But and there were a few manuscripts where I thought, okay, this isn't a great start, but it's calling to me to finish it. There's something in this that will redeem the slow start, and so it proved. You know, even the slow ones kind of justified their worth. You know, really and truly, out of the 100 and whatever 30 manuscripts, shall we say, I'd say 120 were, you know, up there, kind of met the mark. And I really did enjoy it. You know, it was a reading pleasure.
I'm so glad you said that just then, because I was afraid that people that I'm going to approach this year to become judges might get scared off by the idea of 1 million and something words to read. But so at what stage do you expect a manuscript to be when you're reading it as a judge?
Well, if you'd asked me that question 6 or 7 months ago, I would have said the good stuff would be apparent. It mightn't necessarily be polished. I expected most of the stuff to be quite rough, but as it turned out, so much of the stuff really was polished. I mean, so much of the material was smooth to read. I ended up forgetting I was a judge for a lot of it. I ended up forgetting I was judging for a competition, and ended up just being a reader, reading for pleasure. I was amazed with how kind of technically efficient everything was.
Yeah.
So I would, unhelpfully, I would say to this year's entrance, just don't rely on your brilliance to just to be apparent, to be kind of incandescent through the kind of the mess. If you really want to rise to the top, you're probably going to have to be pretty polished on the line level as well, because certainly the 36 entries that made the winners list, the runners up list, and the highly commended list were all like extremely polished.
And can I ask you, of all those manuscripts that you read, did you almost know on the first reading which would be your final 12?
No. There were about 4 or 5. I should say there were 3 judges, and we were all given whatever 100 and something manuscripts.
127.
127 each, and we all had to pick 12 each, and then decide out of that 36 between the 3 of us who would, or I should say among the 3 of us. I have to be grammatical, don't I? Because I have to appear to be a good judge. We had to decide which 12 would be the winners, which 12 would be runners up, and which 12 would be highly commended. But it wasn't for my batch, my 127. There were 5 instantly. I knew, well, they're going in my 12. These are like, this is better than stuff I'm writing or have ever written. Why are these people not being published and I've been published?
Yeah.
I had that, that really sort of confusing sort of sensation of being jealous and being so in awe at the same time, and being thrilled as well. So there were about 5 of those, and then unhelpfully, then there were about 40 which could easily have,
It's great to hear that.
slotted into my short list. Really, I was absolutely heartbreaking selecting the 7 or so that would also slot into my final 12.
I should mention at this stage, when the 3 judges together have chosen the 12 winners, the other 24 people, entries left that have been short or long listed, will receive a critique of their work from the judge who judged it. So it's something. And the feedback I get from that is people find it very encouraging to get those critiques. So Sally Ann, so much I want to ask you. You've been to the novel fair several times.
Mm-hmm.
What keeps you coming back?
Well, I think it's just the kind of the unexpected. I mean, the best part of my job is kind of discovering new voices, and I think that is kind of as Gavin was saying, it's a room of writers, and we haven't read anything before we meet the writers, so it's quite an interesting, it's quite an unusual experience for me. Normally, if I have those kind of one-to-one meetings, I'll have read their pitch and kind of probably a few chapters beforehand. So it's completely blind dating. And then, I mean, what's incredible is the range and breadth of the writers that, I remember a few years ago having a chat with Michelle Gallen, who was writing kind of a brilliant comedy. And then the next one might be a crime novel, or there might be a kind of, literary fiction. So I think that's really exciting that you don't know. I think that just the range of talent there. And also on a kind of a personal level, I like, I'm a big fan of it being, it's amazing how you pivoted to being virtual the last couple of years, but I love it as an opportunity just to connect with other agents and other editors as a kind of a live event. It's really nice. And it is, as Katrina was saying, I think it's hopefully people aren't scary. I mean, everyone's going in there trying to find, we all want to find great new authors. And so I think it always feels like quite a warm, relaxed atmosphere, which is really nice as well.
Yes, and we're going to try, obviously, to bring back a blended version, and hopefully by next February, we will be able to have at least part of it, and not the whole lot of it in the centre. But of course, as we always point out, the big thing about the online, which we had to pivot very quickly, is the access for international writers, for international publishers and agents, and also just the ability for people with who just can't get to Dublin to for the day here in the centre to be able to take part in the competition. Even as a member of the Novel Fair team for several years now myself, I still do find, that magic that happens between the publisher or agent when they meet the writer for that 15 minutes. I don't know how you can decide. And it's such an intense day, or 2 days as it is at this stage. So does the synopsis make a difference? Like, would you read the synopsis while you're sitting there talking to the writer?
Me? Are you asking?
That's for you, Sally-Ann,
no, I don't. I think synopsis is probably, I think they're, I always call them a technical document. I think writers do have to do them. And I think it's a useful tool when to kind of see, maybe, if you're already interested, you can kind of use the synopsis to look at where the book is going after the 10,000 words or whatever you've read. But no, what I tend to do is, and this is actually, I think, a benefit, sorry, this is Camden noise. The benefit of being there in person is I kind of can't help myself flicking through what's on the writer's desk. And I tend to look at their pitch or their cover letter. Sometimes the authors have done a cover letter as if it's to the agent or the editor, and sometimes it's the pitch, and either way is good for me. So I kind of tend to look at the pitch and then start reading the first couple of pages kind of while talking to them. So, and actually that gives you kind of such a good immediate sense of kind of what it is that the author is doing. So I would say the synopsis is probably the least important. I think you have to do it, but I think it's hard to make a synopsis exciting. I think really it's just giving you the plot overview.
Katrina, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's a relief. Yeah, hearing that the synopsis is not important. I struggled so much. I remember that, really struggling with the synopsis and the pitch. The pitch part killed me. Like, I remember practicing in front of the mirror and it just, maybe if you've experience in the corporate world or something and you're used to this elevator pitch, but yeah, I struggled so much. And I regret not asking for help with it, because I think having published 2 novels since, and having editors write your synopsis or your blurb at the back of the book, and it makes you see the novel in a completely fresh way. Like, you think, wow, I would never have put that as the main thread of the book. So I think having a third person read the novel would be really helpful if for the synopsis. Yeah,
as long as it's not a professional editor. So Gavin, back to you about the synopsis. Was it helpful to you? Did you feel that most of the synopsis actually told you what the novel was about before you started to read the manuscript?
Yeah, I think the best ones are the ones that do tell you. That do tell you kind of on a kind of a point by point level, how the plot is going to proceed, certainly from where you leave the manuscript, from the 10,000 words. The end, they certainly the ones like that gave me the sense that this person is kind of, they've either they've written the manuscript, written the whole thing, they've worked it out, they know who the characters are, and they know the character's journey, they know the changes the character is going to undergo in order to create the plot. So something like that, a kind of a well worked out plot does give you the sense that this is somebody who has the chops, you know, to be a writer. But it's more important, I think, for a publisher to see that than for me. I would never dismiss as a judge, and I didn't dismiss as a judge something on the basis of a not very good synopsis. The kind of synopses that I balk at as a judge tend to be the kind of blurby synopses, the ones where somebody tries to kind of mimic the kind of summary you'd see on the back cover of a book. Those ones.
And I like them.
Yeah, well, I
find synopses really boring. So yeah, so that's there. I'm very happy with the shortened, which is really something that should be more in the pitch than the synopsis technically. But I don't mind them.
It's funny, I was looking back over last year's video of the Novel Fair launch, and the subject of synopsis came up as well. And that very idea that a novel or a synopsis, some of them were like the blurbs on the back of books, and they were so good that they were actually almost used word for word as a blurb on the back of a book. So I suppose it's a matter of taste, really. But what I guess
it should be said, actually, Betty, as well, that you know, some of the most some of the greatest books ever written, if you reduce them to a synopsis, can seem very, very dull and dry. You know, nothing happens in Anna Karenina. Not very much happens in The Ginger Man.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about the writing ultimately.
They weren't entering Novel Fair.
They weren't entering Novel Fair. No, that's true. But but I was very open to that. You know, that as a judge, that you know, some novels aren't plot driven. I'm not a plotty writer myself. Katrina's novel wasn't very plot driven, so like she says herself. So
that's what was interesting. Sorry, about meeting. But in 2014, when we met people in real life, like the other 11 finalists I met, I was fascinated by how people wrote. Like we met a few times afterwards and as Sally Ann said, like there was crime, fantasy, children's fiction, all sorts of genres. And to hear how different people wrote was fascinating. And then some of the more plot-driven writers were making wall charts and had whiteboards of things, which fascinated me because I hadn't a clue what was going to happen next. But some people started knowing, you know, what was going to happen at the end. And it was brilliant to hear. It kind of helped me with my own writing to just see different processes and how people arrived at the same ending.
Just for the audience, keep sending in your questions and we'll get to them in about 15 minutes. I said at the beginning that we go through what Novel Fair is. So I think we have gone through what Novel Fair is. But just for anybody who's just a little bit curious, I'll talk about what it's like in an online setting, first of all, and then, you know, we have touched on the face-to-face setting. But you get 15 minutes. You have a prep day 2 weeks before the Novel Fair itself occurs, and we go through. It's a half day, and we bring in a former judge, former Novel Fair winner, anybody involved in the book industry and whatever, and we have sort of role playing and all kinds of things. Don't let that put you off now. This is just, you're actually pitching to the person, whether it's the former Novel Fair winner or whatever. And our feedback from that is that it's very, very useful. But so when the process is, when your manuscript comes in, we're accepting manuscripts via Submittable now for the last few years. The people here at the Irish Writers Centre don't see your novel as such. Like, we don't have anything to do with reading the manuscript. It's all the manuscripts are judged blindly. So nobody's name is on the manuscript, or nothing at all to give any clue to the judges about who they might be. And it was very interesting this time, wasn't it, Gavin? Because some writers you would have sworn were women writers, weren't.
Yeah.
And there's kind of, it's great though that you have those kind of preconceptions.
Yeah, it's great to be surprised. Yeah, yeah, and how quickly you kind of form kind of preconceptions based on somebody's writing. Um, yeah, and you know, things like nationality as well. You know,
Yeah, yeah, that
amazing,
was, yeah, that was,
amazing
yeah.
manuscript set in Hungary, set in Budapest, and we all swore it was somebody Hungarian.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah,
But it wasn't, of course.
yeah. So then, what happens next then in the process is the judges who have already been chosen beforehand are given the number of novels is shared out between them. As I say, in 2022, there were 375 submissions, which is great. It's going up every year. And then once the judging process obviously takes a couple of months, really, isn't it, Gavin? And then all your time, as you said. And then probably this coming year, I think might be the 4th of December, we ring each one of the 12 people who are the winners. And they, at that stage, have to send in a manuscript, a full manuscript, really, of 50,000 words by the end of the following week. So just for people who are wondering, you kind of need to be starting your novel now, or at least, know that if you send in a really, really good submission of 10,000 words, you'll be expected to send in 50,000 words within a week of being one of the winners. So, and then you have your novel prep day at the end of January, and the novel fair days themselves take place in the second last week of February. So time is moving on a bit here. I'm going to ask the three of you now just to give your best advice to people who are entering novel fair for 2023. Katrina.
So I suppose my advice would be, I won't give any advice on the writing part of it. I think about the pitch and the synopsis and just thinking about what you're writing. That was the biggest surprise for me, was in the prep day being told by judges or former judges that you have to think about where your novel sits on the bookshelf and like which part of the bookshelf your novel sits in. And I hadn't thought about that. And that was really helpful in the prep day. So to think about, what genre your novel is, what other writers or other books is it like? That was huge, to try and figure out when you're describing it to the judges, to the agents and publishers, what is it like? And that, I think that'll help you with the pitch and the synopsis. It'll help to kind of distill it down. So it's the peripheral kind of stuff around the writing. That's what I'd suggest, is just to, after the writing, focus on that, because it can help give you confidence too, that you're not fumbling on the day and trying to, you're not completely surprised by questions, because you don't have that much time with agents and publishers, and like they are very welcoming and friendly, but you still want to, get your spoke in and say what you want to say. So the preparation around that, and again, asking friends or something could help. Or going into a bookshop and literally looking at a load of books and seeing, okay, mine is like this or like that or whatever.
That's really solid advice. And did you practice in the mirror with your pitch?
I did. I was too precious to show my manuscript to anyone until after the event. So I would be less precious now about that. But the mirror helped a bit. And it's helped for Zoom as well, hasn't it? We've had to learn how we look.
Sally Ann, I'm kind of just going slightly off track here because I meant to ask you earlier on. A lot of people get confused with the notion of a literary agent. Do you have to have a literary agent before you can submit to a publisher? These are the questions that are asked. What uses a literary agent? Could you just explain that process step by step?
So you don't have to have an agent. I think that it's becoming more important, I guess. It depends on kind of how you want to be published. I think a lot of traditional publishers do only accept submissions from agents. I think nearly all, if not all, of the Irish publishers based in Dublin, I think, are open to unagented submissions. But basically, the agent will work with you editorially, should have contacts across the industry, and we'll kind of work with you to kind of, I think what I'm looking for really when I take on a new manuscript is the potential. I'm not expecting it to be perfect. I do need to see the kind of kernel of something there. So I think, as Gavin was saying, I think it's important to be as polished as you can be, but then and a good agent should be then working with you to kind of hone your manuscript, work with you on the pitch, because I think, as Katrina was saying, I mean, it's a very different skill to write a good pitch than it is to kind of write a good novel. And then the agent basically looks after the business side of an author's career. So I think looks after the kind of the deal negotiation, the kind of contracts, selling translation rights, film rights, and any problems along the way, the agent is there. So kind of keeps the relationship between an author and editor creative. Hopefully, it means the agent can be, I'm very happy to be the bad guy and ask the annoying questions. So yeah, I think it's up to the individual, I think, but it's I think it can, I think my relationships, I've got clients that I've worked with kind of over, one of my clients has on the children's side is we've published 50 books together, which is amazing. So it can be a really long career, and kind of the agent should be your champion the whole way along.
So would you say if a book needed editing, obviously most books need some editing, you would introduce your client, I guess your writer, to an editor? Is that the way it works? And then
I tend to do the editing myself. I think I really like that aspect, and actually it's I think it's kind of a nice way of getting to know an author. If authors don't, sometimes some authors, very few, but kind of occasionally I've had an author and I love what they've done, but they haven't really wanted to work on it with me. And then that's usually kind of not the right author for me, because I kind of just really like that aspect. And I think you do kind of need to be, I believe anyway, I think you need to be prepared to have other hands on your manuscript, because the whole way along, I think there's, your editor will be working on it with you. And I think it is a very collaborative process. So I tend to do that. I think it would be, it'd be kind of I think there are really great editorial consultancies that I think sometimes if it's not the right time for me to take on an author, I might recommend that they do that extra work first. But usually if I kind of believe in something, even if it needs, and sometimes I could be working with authors for a couple of years before it, can be anything from kind of one draft before submission to a really long time. So yeah, usually it's something that we would do together.
It's really good to hear all this, because everyone has those questions to a lesser or larger extent. So it's great for me to be able to ask those questions. And Gavin, finally, your advice, and we have a load of questions here at the side. So after that, I'm going to go to the questions.
Well, I mean, based on last year's entries, I mean, the standard is going to be very high this year. So my advice would be just give yourself the best chance by being as polished as you can be.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be flippant by saying that, and it seems like very vague advice, but make it sort of as technically smooth as you can be. Get your punctuation right. Make sure your commas are in the right places. Make sure you're using full stops where there should be full stops, instead of sort of commas. I see that a lot. John McGahern used to do that in his early books, but he meant it. And you can always tell when somebody doesn't mean it. They don't mean to have kind of run-on sentences like that. A good test is if you don't know where what the right punctuation mark to use is, or you don't know where to put a punctuation mark is, think about where would you draw a breath. Read your manuscript out aloud. Think about how long you'd pause for breath.
It's really good.
Think about punctuation as notation, for a sound, but also, bear in mind it's grammatical function as well. Make sure your clauses are nicely isolated within a sentence, because you really want you really want the judges to kind of be induced to that state, that really pleasurable state that we experienced, of feeling that you're just enjoying it as a reader rather than as a judge. And if you get to the end of a manuscript as a judge and go, I want to read what happens next. Where did the last half an hour go? The shadows have just moved across the room. I've really enjoyed this 10,000 words. Then you know you're really firing.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to just go to some of the comments now. First of all, thank you, Gavin, for your lovely critique of my runner-up submission from Audrey. Okay, that's a relief to hear, Sally Ann. I find the synopsis one of the most difficult parts of the whole submission process. So it helps somebody out. And then, Gavin, somebody is writing to you, but we are told not to write the synopsis as a blurb. Gavin, could you clarify that a bit?
I mean, as Sally Ann said, like, you know, everybody has a different preference.
My advice is not the correct advice, really. It's just a personal thing, because I don't. The correct advice is what Gavin said, that it should.
Well, I base my earlier answer on. Do you remember we had the whatchamacallit last January, the
prep day.
So what you call it? The dry run session with the
prep day.
The prep day, yeah. Who was the former winner we had on that day? I can't.
Marianne Lee.
Marianne Lee, yeah. And I remember her specifically saying that her blurb was like just a kind of a dry point by point summary of how her plot proceeded. And I remember thinking, well, that's exactly the sort of synopsis I would respond to as a judge, because I would feel that this person has written the novel, that they know exactly how it's going to proceed, that there won't be any difficulties if I gave this person a slot in the final 12, in suddenly hitting them with, you know, a request for another 50,000 words. You know, you know that they'd have those 50,000 words.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna.
Was there much disagreement, Gavin, among the judges?
No.
So it was quite easy to come up with your 12.
Yes, yeah, it was very, very easy. Yeah. We were all in agreement about like six of the top 12. We were all like, you know, this is amazing stuff, and there was such a broad range of genres as well. Like it was. There were at least 2 YA novels. I seem to remember one of the YAs got into the final 12, and it was, and you know, the next 6 in the top 12 kind of were easy to decide on as well.
It was very interesting, actually. Something I noticed for 2022, we had submissions from about 15 countries worldwide, but. And that has been the trend, obviously, since the Novel Fair went online, and before that as well, to some extent. But a lot of the winners this year, compared with last year, were Irish writers, and bearing in mind that the judging was blind, I don't know how to account for that. But it's just an interesting thing that I just wanted to throw in there. Okay, Gavin and Katrina, can you give us some tips about how to make your novel stand out, please? You've probably given tips, but well, obviously you've given us loads of tips. Any one thing to make your novel stand out?
Well, to make your novel stand out, is to kind of set the, you know, set the tone really early on in your manuscript, and just to carry that tone through, just to sustain the tone. It's not to kind of, not to start with an explosion or anything like that. It's just to kind of it's about. I've always said this as a teacher. Like I've always thought of writing as like as notation for a sound.
Yeah.
As much as like a kind of a medium to say something. It's about the complete art. It's about the complete object. And it's about kind of working out your glossary and working out kind of what punctuation you're going to use, being very careful on the word choice, being very kind of punctilious about avoiding like bum notes, just being very, very, writing with your ear.
Actually, one thing I meant to say to you earlier on as well, we get questions from people about, do you have to send in, say, the first 5 chapters of your novel, if that's 10,000 words, or the first 3 chapters? Like, do they have to be successive chapters, or can they just pick out chapters? What did you feel? Did you experience some people sending in novel or their manuscripts without, from, we'd say chapter 1, chapter 6, chapter 10?
Jeepers, yeah, I think most of them tended to be, the first 10,000 rather than kind of a chunk.
Yeah, I think like we don't insist on that, but I think it's probably the best idea from a readability point of view as well.
Yes, I think it's a sensible approach.
Thanks, Gavin. Marianne, did you have anything to add there? Or Katrina, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's late night.
It's the same colour hair. Yeah.
And I was talking to her last night.
Yeah, I suppose I obviously was a writer and not a judge, but having judged a different competition, I was thinking there when you asked the question, like freshness for me is the huge thing. And I judged a writing competition of teenagers before, and there was like from 12 to kind of 18 or 19. And I went in, like, as Gavin was talking about your preconceptions being disturbed, that I thought or assumed that the older ones had an advantage, and that a 17 or 18-year-old would be, was going to win. But I found the younger writers like far better from my perspective. Like, they mightn't have been as polished, but there was a freshness and a newness and
imagination.
Yeah, imagination, exactly. And there wasn't a load of preconception. So there's something I find really lovely about honest writing. Like, it's from the heart, and you're just following a story, and you're not overthinking it, just to write what you want to write. I suppose that's kind of comes across on the page, I think, if you're not being
contrived,
cynical or contrived.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, I'm moving swiftly on now because we haven't got that much time left. This is just kind of does the 50,000 words include the original 10,000 that you submitted? And that's yes. Actually, this question is the one I've just asked Gavin. When submitting the 10,000 words, do you recommend sending the opening 10,000 words of the novel? Or do people tend to submit, say, the first and last 5,000 or any other combinations? I mean, people can if they want to, but we certainly wouldn't advise it, because, the judge really won't get the sense of what the novel is. But I know there is a temptation to sort of show what a brilliant ending you've got as well. But
I always say when people, because we generally ask for the first 3 chapters, and if authors tell me, but my book really gets good in chapter 4 or 5, then I would say, well, then you need to look at your beginning again, because I think that is ultimately, even if people love whatever 50,000 words you choose, they're going to ask you to send the first chunk. So I think, as Katrina said, I think pitch is so important. And I would say your opening pages, your opening chapters are so important, because people might not, if they don't get past that, then they may not, they may miss out on what could be a really great novel.
Okay, thank you. Question: which genres are you looking for entries in? As Gavin said, the range is
historical novels. There were YA novels. There was like
science fiction, dystopian.
Yeah, there was like Flann O'Brien style whimsy and blather. There was all sorts.
Okay, so there are trends, I think, in publishing. Would you agree with that, Sally Ann?
Yes.
But
yeah,
I mean, you don't want to write your novel around a trend that
I
might
think
pass.
yeah, I think it's dangerous to write to what seems like the current trend, because I mean, publishing whatever you're writing now for Novel Fair next year, I mean, you're probably looking at a 2025 publication date.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, so really it's so hard to predict that kind of what that trend might be then. And I would say it's probably not going to be the writing, you know, as Katrina was saying, honest writing or kind of writing from the heart. I think that you should be writing the book that only you can write, and not trying to fit into kind of some neat trend or category.
Brilliant. So I'm getting several questions here that are the same about the one we've talked about, which parts of the novel should be submitted. Okay. How long should the synopsis be? It's 300 words. In writing a novel, how many days do panelists spend to make 10,000 word 3 chapters or so to get the text presentable? In other words, do writers think they write fast or slow? Gavin.
Do I write fast or slow? Like, what's the best way to do it? Well, I'm completely chaotic. I mean, I wouldn't be. I definitely wouldn't lead by example. Whatever works for you. I mean, it's always good advice to who was it? Was it what's his name? Was it Steinbeck said, or maybe it was Norman Mailer said, make a date with your muse, you know, and you know your job is just to turn up. So, you know, you have to kind of you have to be very disciplined if you are going to finish a manuscript. I always start out chaotically and very kind of idiosyncratically, and it kind of shows then in my books, because they're all over the place. But then when you know the publisher looks for the manuscript and I have 3 months left, that's when I get most of it written. So yeah.
Very human condition.
Yeah, so like the traditional way is always the most productive.
Thanks, Gavin. Somebody's asking, is the novel meant to be complete at 50,000 words? No. The 50,000 words is what you have to send in within the week to show that you actually have potentially got a full novel. But bear in mind, when you send that in early December, if you're one of the 12 winners, you can still keep polishing and adding and everything to it until the Novel Fair in February. And again, obviously after that, once it goes to an agent or a publisher. And also, when you send the 50,000 words into the Irish Writers Centre in that week, nobody in here reads it. We just want proof that there is a novel almost complete. Okay. Make a regular date and time with your muse. Great advice. You just have to hope the muse is a frequent visitor, I guess. Can a novel...
You're not stood up by your muse.
Yeah. Can a novel be too long? I actually don't know the answer to that. I guess War and Peace, whatever. Sally Ann?
I mean, it's kind of I think it's a matter of personal taste. It also depends genre to genre. I think there's a trend recently for quite slim literary novels, which I kind of love. But it's, I would just say that if your novel is over, I think 100,000 words is kind of the figure that I think above that just doesn't need to be over 100,000 words. I think quite often anything that's over that, I think probably could do with being kind of cut back for pacing. But there's plenty of huge novels that, you know, are a big doorstop. So I think it's, you know, a novel should be as long as it should be, but just make sure that it, you know, that you're not padding it out.
Yeah, I suppose by the time you get to the publishing editorial stage anyway, you'd be getting a lot of advice on that. Are the submissions open to everyone or only writers from Ireland? Open to everyone all over the world. So sure you enter. Okay. With the genres, I meant if new adult is an option. Yes, new adult is an option. Okay. If a novel is chosen, do we get help with the book? As I have a novel written, but feel I need someone to help with the final draft. Is this possible? So the thing is, with one of the conditions of entry to Novel Fair is you can't ask a professional editor to go over it. It has to sort of be in its raw state, but if it is picked up by a publisher, there's a lot of editing advice and help available. Am I right about that, Sally Ann?
Yes. Yeah.
Does a first-time author need to have a ready-made market to sell to? Example, Facebook followers, etc. This is kind of like a question about self-publicizing the novel, I guess. What do you think?
Well, I would say just concentrate on writing a great novel. I think all of that stuff is going to come down further down the line. And yeah, I think if you have a huge following, it's a bonus. But I think most writers don't. Most writers will build it as they lead up to publication.
Okay, thank you, Sally Ann. This is a question for Sally Ann again. What is the worst mistake you could make in pitching to an agent? That's a good one, actually.
I think, oh my God, what is the worst thing? I think the Katrina gave really good advice on the pitch, and one of the things I love to see is that you're a reader as well as a writer. And I think being able to help position your novel in the market is really helpful. So I guess the worst thing you can do is, I think, sometimes I think there's pitches that it's like, oh, this is the next Harry Potter, or and it just kind of becomes a little bit meaningless. So I think it's just making sure that you, I think being aware. I think if you're not sure what your book is about, then nobody else is going to be able to be. So I think that's probably the thing to focus on.
Thank you so much for that. There's a few that are similar again. The average word count of a debut novel, and can a novel be too short? We've answered that, really, haven't we?
It can't really be too short. There's, a brilliant
it won't be a novel
that Natasha Brown published a novel called Assembly, and I think it's like 15,000 words that Hamish Hamilton published last summer. So it's usually, you would say that's too slim, because I kind of, I think there's like printing margins, but it's I think really it's just whatever is.
Max Porter's his debut was only 16,000. As you say, there was very kind of sort of funky typesetting going on in that, and illustrations.
He wouldn't have qualified for the novel further. Okay. USA grammar or UK grammar?
Whatever.
Just be consistent. Pick one. If you're American, I'd go with
That's
USA.
Right. Yeah. Question for Sally Ann, do you represent people who don't live in England or Ireland, but who do write in English, asking for a friend?
Yes, we are open to it. I think we probably tend to say to American authors that they're probably better served by an American agent, but we're definitely open.
Sally Ann, again, I know you're not looking for children's books subs at the moment. Oh yeah, I think you are. But we didn't say that at the beginning. But do you think you'd be opening to them again in the future, or would you be accepting them for the Novel Fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was more a case of I'm recently back from maternity leave, more than any kind of nix on kids' books. So yes, absolutely.
We don't really accept children's books as such. Novel Fair, more young adults, or I suppose middle. What do they call a middle grade?
Yeah, books. I think
we do. Yeah, we would accept
children's authors there before, but I think it tends to be more middle grade and up.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. I guess it wouldn't be little children's books or whatever. Is the submission window the same as last year, the 1st to the 30th of September? Yes, it is. And now just a few. Okay, so I think that's it. Cassia, have we covered all the questions there? Cassia?
Yeah, that's all of them.
Okay, that's brilliant. And that just brings us up to 8 o'clock. Hold on. Mine is such Irish. I don't understand what that is. So I'd just like to say a really sincere thank you to our 3 panelists. I think we've gotten through an awful lot. And I think that it was a really, really good session. I think we've answered a lot of questions for people. There are still questions coming in, but we'll look after them. We'll get back to you next week with the answers to those. We might just put up a blog post or something like that to answer all the questions that are coming in so much. Actually, it's a lot of people saying thank you very much. It's been very helpful. So thank you to the audience as well. I hope you got so much out of it, and I hope you all get to go ahead and submit your novels in September, and I hope we'll be at the book launch in a couple of years' time. Okay, thank you very much from the Irish Writers Centre. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Katrina, and thank you, Sally Ann. And we'll see you all again sometime.